Welcome to Playback, Tier 2 World's weekly showcase of our best stories from around the globe. Coming up, conflict continues unabated in Mariupol as the Russian offensive advances. We take a look at why the Ukrainian port city is so important to the Kremlin. Turkiye launches a fresh cross-border operation against the PKK terrorist organization in northern Iraq. And Israeli forces target worshippers with tear gas and rubber bullets during dawn prayers. After 2 months of heavy Russian bombardment, the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol has been leveled with 90% of homes and buildings destroyed. So why is the city so important to the Kremlin? Regan Devin explains.
Russia's attack on Ukraine included a particularly fierce siege of Mariupol. The southeastern city is an important win for Moscow. Mariupol is located on the Sea of Azov, between the Russia-annexed Crimean Peninsula and the Donbass region, where Kremlin-backed separatists have control of the provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk. Russia now has unfettered access by land from Crimea to Mariupol and controls the coastline. It also has a transport corridor to Donbass to distribute supplies and logistics to its forces. Mariupol is home to Ukraine's iron and steel industry. Almost a fifth of Ukrainian iron is exported by sea from the city. It's also a key export hub for corn and wheat to the Middle East, Africa, and China. The loss of Mariupol places considerable strain on the Ukrainian economy. The Kremlin describes attacks on Ukraine as denazification. Mariupol has reportedly been a base for the Azov Battalion, a neo-Nazi former paramilitary group that's now part of Ukraine's National Guard. Moscow says the group is a threat to the Russian Federation. There is also symbolism in taking Mariupol. Russian President Vladimir Putin says large parts of Ukraine, including the southern city, were once part of Russia. He's used the term Novorossiya to describe areas in South and East Ukraine. The word means new Russia. Regan Devine, TRT World.
Dozens of towns around capital Kiev were occupied by Russian troops for a month until they left in late March. Locals say they killed innocent civilians and destroyed homes. Obeida Hida has one of their stories.
Igor took shelter with his neighbors in Ploske, east of Kiev, while advancing Russian troops exchanged fire with Ukrainian forces in the street above.
On March 21st, when they entered the town, the Azov forces and Russians were exchanging heavy fire. I stayed in the shelter with my neighbors. When the explosions stopped, Sasha and his nephew wanted to leave because his wife and daughter were at home alone. First, I told him not to go because it was dark and they could shoot. When they left and started walking across the yard, I heard gunfire.
Igor's home and those nearby suffered heavy damage during the fighting. His wife and daughters fled under fire before Russian troops arrived. He says 20 people were killed in his town of 2,000 people, including his friend Sasha, who he says was shot while trying to reach home. They walked down this path, and just down here where this destroyed tank is where Russian soldiers were positioned. They opened fire, killing Igor's neighbor, and Igor was forced to bury his neighbor here in the backyard. Yuri, Sasha's nephew, barely escaped the attack that killed his uncle.
I managed to hide behind the tree, thinking they would come and finish me. They started to talk, and I jumped over the fence to try to escape. But they started shooting at me again. The Russian wouldn't let you bury anyone. We couldn't bury my uncle until Ukrainian soldiers came back.
Russian soldiers occupied the town for nearly 2 weeks. Yuri says soldiers harassed locals.
There were 3 tough days after he was shot. I didn't eat or sleep. I only drank water. Then they came and put us up against the wall and started looting the house. They made me admit that my uncle was killed by shrapnel, but I know how he really died.
Yuri and his neighbors are still grieving. They say replacing what's lost is impossible. Obeida Hida, TRT World, Ploske, Ukraine.
Since Russia began its attack on Ukraine, nearly 10 million people are believed to have fled their homes. Many are displaced within Ukraine, while 5 million people are estimated to have sought refuge abroad. Poland has taken in the largest number of refugees. And as Rahul Radhakrishnan reports, as the fight with Russia shifts to eastern Ukraine, many people are returning to their homes in other parts of the country.
For a sleepy town at Poland's border with Ukraine, this train station has been unusually busy. People queuing up here at the Przemysl station are headed back to Ukraine.
Home means everything to us. When something goes wrong at home, it pulls us towards it like nothing else. Our souls are hurting because of the war. We can't stand it, and it's been a month since we left our Ukraine. It's our land, our soil. Everything there is precious to us.
Ludmila and her husband, Yaroslav, say they are aware of the risks of returning to a Ukraine still at war. But like many others, they want to return to support Ukraine's defenders in their fight against Russia and to be among loved ones ahead of the Easter holiday. And it seems the eagerness to return home has crossed a generational gap.
Deep inside, I'm happy to go back. I'm going back home, but I'm afraid. I don't know how to describe it. I'm worried. We're getting on the train and worried if the train will be bombed or not, if we will be sleeping in the house, if the house will be bombed. It's very scary, but we are going back. We have to go back.
Nearly 14 hours after boarding, as the train pulled into Kiev's central station, 14-year-old Kirill's excitement turned into panic. It's a legitimate concern amid Russia's ongoing assault on Ukraine. Russia has been accused of targeting civilian areas, including a packed train station in Kramatorsk in recent weeks. Are those sirens? He asks repeatedly in this video his mother sent us from her phone. We could not verify if the sounds in this video were sirens or from the train. In March, Oksana and her sister Lena and their children were trapped in a basement in Cherniv for more than a week as Russian troops laid siege to their city. They say they didn't think they'd make it out alive.
Our city is ruined. About 70% of buildings have been destroyed. So many people have died, like at least 700, and there are many missing persons. It's all very frightening.
For them, the idea of returning home is unthinkable at the moment.
It's dangerous to go back. I want to go back badly. I want to go back home, but I'm scared.
At the border crossing near Przemysl, hundreds are walking back from Ukraine, while hundreds more leave Poland on foot. Polish authorities say 22,000 people returned to Ukraine over the weekend. They say that's the highest number of returnees since the beginning of the war. But whether they decide to stay or leave, most Ukrainians say that one thing is for certain, that their lives and their country will never be the same. Rahul Radhakrishnan, TRT World, Przemysl in Poland.
We continue with some other stories that made headlines in the past week. On Monday, Turkiye launched Operation Clawlock in northern Iraq to eliminate the PKK terrorist organization that poses a threat to the country's security. The operation is the continuation of an ongoing process of military actions against the PKK since 2020. Our diplomatic correspondent Andrew Hopkins reports.
Turkish military jets have been mobilised in the latest operation against the PKK terror group and its positions near the Turkiye-Iraq border. Late at night, the Turkish Defence Minister arrived at the operations centre and outlined what was underway.
There's an operation plan, and according to this, we are particularly targeting the Metina, Zab, and Avashin Basyan areas. In these areas, shelters, ammunition depots, headquarters, gathering locations, and tunnel networks belonging to the terrorists are being destroyed. Our special forces units and commandos have infiltrated to these areas, supported by unmanned aerial vehicles, attack helicopters, and artillery elements.
These are the areas the Turkish military says have been targeted, positions in the Kandil Mountains in northern Iraq, where the group is based. These operations have at times caused friction with the government in Baghdad, but the Turkish Defence Minister stressed that Iraq's territorial integrity and sovereignty were being respected. The operation began just a few days after the Prime Minister of the Kurdish regional government in northern Iraq flew to Turkey to meet President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The two sides have previously cooperated in similar operations. In a tweet, the Turkish presidency's head of communications said,
"Our Turkish armed forces are destroying terror nests during Operation Clawlock in northern Iraq. Just as we have not allowed PKK terrorists to take a breath anywhere, we will never allow an opportunity to supporters of terrorism. We are effectively implementing our strategy of destroying terrorism at its source, outlined by our President, and we continue our struggle without interruption against all terrorist organizations that take aim at our nation.
The number of attacks inside Turkiye attributed to the PKK have drastically fallen in recent years, but the Turkish government still wants to make sure it can't consolidate its positions across the border. It also wants to shut down avenues of cooperation with the YPG terror group, which operates next door in northern Syria on Turkiye's doorstep. Andrew Hopkins, TRT World.
On Thursday, Israeli forces stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied East Jerusalem after morning prayers and expelled worshippers from the courtyards of the compound. During an early morning raid, Israeli soldiers attacked Palestinian worshippers, firing tear gas canisters while they were being forcibly evacuated. An elderly man was injured by a rubber bullet and some others were also wounded. In the past week alone, around 200 Palestinians have been injured in Israeli raids at the holy site. Israel has also twice carried out airstrikes on Gaza after rockets were fired into Israel. To Pakistan now, where the new cabinet has been sworn in following the ousting of Imran Khan as Prime Minister. Khan's successor, Shehbaz Sharif, will have his hands full, with his first task being to pull Pakistan's economy out of tailspin. Kamran Yusuf reports from Islamabad.
Long lines of people wait their turn to get essential food items at discounted rates. These government-run stores offer some relief from the soaring inflation, which reached close to 13% in March. But residents say they don't just want temporary solutions from their new leaders.
Without political stability, there won't be any economic stability. This is a coalition government comprising different political parties, so let's see how it performs.
Our hope is that the new government will bring inflation under control. When the government was in the opposition, it protested against high inflation, and now we hope they will reduce the prices of essential items.
Shehbaz Sharif replaced Imran Khan as the country's prime minister after a bitterly contested no-confidence vote. Shehbaz heads a coalition government and has 15 months in office to deliver before the next election is scheduled.
This government has assumed charge, taken control of this country at a time of a serious economic crisis. Pakistan is facing the challenge of current account deficit, fiscal deficit, huge inflation, and Pakistani rupee is going down. So we are caught in a spiral.
And the situation is so precarious that the central bank says it only has enough foreign reserves to cover 2 months of imports.
In order to bring some semblance of certainty to the economy, the government has decided to immediately resume talks with the International Monetary Fund. The Washington-based lender has previously set tough conditions, meaning giving immediate relief to the people will be a challenge.
That task has been made even harder by the continued presence of Shehbaz's predecessor. Imran Khan has drawn large crowds to his rallies and is pressing for early elections. As political tensions deepen, it may be Pakistan's ordinary citizens that pay the price for this power struggle. Kamran Yusuf, TRT World, Islamabad.
And in the U.S., 2 teenage boys have been killed and dozens of people injured following at least 10 mass shootings over the Easter weekend. There were numerous other smaller incidents of gun violence reported across the country, and among the victims was a 7-month-old infant. As our North America correspondent John Brain reports, America's epidemic of gun violence is showing no sign of abating.
The aftermath of a house party in Pittsburgh that began in celebration but ended in tragedy. Around 50 gunshots were fired as the gathering descended into violence. 2 17-year-old boys were killed and several others injured.
2 lives lost, and hundreds of lives are forever changed because we have yet to pass meaningful legislation to lessen the amount of guns in our streets.
A mass shooting is defined as an incident in which there are at least 4 victims. There were 10 such incidents over the Easter weekend, as well as numerous shootings involving just one or two people. And last week, a gunman opened fire on a crowded subway train in New York. People in the city say gun violence there is a way of life.
I think there's a lot of loopholes. You can buy guns at conventions without background checks. You can buy guns from secondary owners without background checks. It's not so hard to get a gun without a background check if you want to.
There's a whole mental health crisis, and that's been going on since I was a young kid.
Various explanations for the upsurge in shootings are being offered, including the disruption caused by the pandemic, the defunding of some police forces in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and a general climate of anger and division across the nation. But some analysts question whether the situation now is really getting worse.
Guns are at the heart of being an American. You know, having a gun is like almost like having a child. It is your constitutional right. So I wouldn't say it's getting worse. It's just manifesting in different ways, and it's being seen in different ways. I mean, the effect of social media and the access.
In 2020, there were more than 45,000 gun deaths, an all-time record, and a rise of 14% on the previous year. But taking into account population increases in America, the rate of gun deaths is actually falling. In 1974, there were 16.3 gun fatalities for every 100,000 people. In 2020, that figure had dropped slightly to 13.6 deaths for every 100,000.
It's difficult to see how America can ever wean itself off guns. Reformers say that fewer weapons and stricter regulations would result in less shootings. But the pro-gun lobby takes the opposite point of view, arguing that the only way for law-abiding citizens to protect themselves is to own a firearm. The answer, therefore, being more guns, not less.
But one thing both sides agree on is that the mass shootings and the tragedies they cause are highly unlikely to end anytime soon. John Brain, TRT World, Washington.
Still to come on Playback, how Jews, Muslims and Christians are celebrating their religious festivals simultaneously this year. And how a Turkish diver is going to new depths to help the environment. For the first time since 1991, Muslims, Jews and Christians have been marking Ramadan, Passover and Easter simultaneously. The alignment is rare because the three religious festivals are based on different calendars. Claire Harriet reports on how minority communities are celebrating their respective holidays in Istanbul.
The little red tram clangs its way up Istiklal Avenue in Beyoğlu, in the heart of Istanbul. Just off the main thoroughfare stands the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church, one of a handful of Christian chapels dotted along the numerous passageways that dissect the busy street. Father Nicodemus says the rare occurrence of Easter and Passover overlapping with Ramadan calls for harmony between the religions.
That's a gift of God to us because it's a time to respect each other, to love each other. The best friendship is dialogue, and every problem can be passed by dialogue. Easter time always is the most important celebration for Christians and for Orthodox also.
Most of the world's Christians have celebrated Easter, but for Orthodox communities, such as those here in Beyoğlu, it isn't until Sunday, April the 24th.
Bizim Paskalya bayramımız kutlamak var. Sonraki de Müslümanlar için Ramazan bayram kutlaması olur. Biz de komşu olarak birbirimize hem iftarımız hem bizim bayram.
A 15-minute stroll down Istiklal takes you to the medieval Galata Tower, and down one of the nearby cobbled streets is the Neve Shalom Synagogue, where Isaac Alalif is rabbi.
Beyoğlu aslında gerçek bir mozaik. Daha da geniş düşünecek olursak İstanbul, Türkiye gerçek bir mozaik. Her taraftan, her dinden, her inançtan, her kültürden insanın bir arada, kardeşçe, mutluluk içerisinde huzurla yaşayabildiği gerçek bir mozaik. Bazen bir ezan sesini, bazen bir çan sesini, bazen de hazanın sesini çok net bir şekilde duyabiliyoruz. Bu birlikteliğin bir simgesidir Beyoğlu.
At the northern end of Istiklal is Taksim Square with its recently constructed mosque. From here, it's easy to retrace the history of the city. The origins of modern Istanbul are there, preserved in the mosques, churches and synagogues, just a short tram ride apart. Claire Herriot, TRT World, Istanbul.
Well, after the Taliban took control of Afghanistan last August, more than 55,000 Afghan refugees moved to the U.S. Andy Rosejan has a look at how their Ramadan in America is helping them adjust to a new life.
Unlike many of his fellow Afghans, Abdul Kakar was lucky. He was able to flee as the Taliban took control in August, but he had to leave his wife and 2 children behind. The Zakat Foundation sprang into action when refugees first started arriving in the U.S. to support those who'd been displaced from Afghanistan.
First day I was crying here, believe me. To spend your 35 years of life there and you just come without any plan or come without any something like documents or something like that.
I think it was overwhelming for all of us, I will be honest with you.
Now, Damir is hopping around the U.S., organizing dinners for observant Muslims to break the Ramadan fast, called iftars, like this one in suburban Washington.
You give them hope that by welcoming them, then showing them that they can live here with the same values that they lived in Afghanistan.
Social services worker and Afghan immigrant Taiba Hederi says these iftars are a chance for Afghan women to realize what they've got now rather than what they've lost.
There's no a power that is going to be controlled, and they're not going to allow you to go out there and be like a abandoned person, a person who is not able to do at least some education or work.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Halil Damir says the first thing that unites Afghan refugees in America is music and bread.
Iftar will bring that memories of Afghanistan to them, hopefully, that they are welcome here.
Like the other 70 or so Afghan refugees here tonight, Abdul says he's still adjusting to life in the United States, from the culture to the traffic. He says he is sure he'll reunite with his family soon, either in Afghanistan or America. Without his family for now, but not without his faith. Andy Rosejan, TRT World, Washington.
And we end in Turkiye with a story about one man doing his bit to save the environment. The UN says about 640,000 tons of net and other fishing materials are discarded into the world's oceans every year. It accounts for about 10% of marine litter. Daniel Padwick has the story of a keen diver in Istanbul who's devoting his life to clearing the Sea of Marmara.
Sergio Ekşihan has been a diving enthusiast for the past 5 decades. He was so fascinated by the beauty of the sea bottom that he became a passionate diver.
When I started scuba diving in 1973, I didn't have a wetsuit. The places you can go were limited. There's a tube, but you cannot go down because there is no suit.
He says the sea bottom was like an aquarium when he first started, but that vivid and colourful scene was almost ruined when he found the proper equipment to dive deeper. The seafloor was carpeted with fishing gear that had been abandoned.
With time, for various reasons, be it technological, pollution or overfishing, this aquarium image deteriorated.
Fishing nets that have been lost at sea are referred to as ghost gear. There are several reasons for the equipment to be abandoned. Severe weather, snags beneath the surface, or interaction with other vessels can increase the number of nets tangled. When Ekşihan started coming across an increasing number of nets trapped under rocks in the deep sea, he decided to remove them with the help of 2 friends. And over the past 16 years, he has cleaned up almost 30,000 square meters of ghost gear. And he has found new ways to make use of it.
We turn some clean nets into mesh bags and sell them. We donate the income to the Marine Life Conservation Society. If a net is not clean, we send it to the villages after washing it a bit. Villagers use it when growing tomatoes, peppers and especially strawberries. They cover the products with it to protect from weather conditions. The nets that we found 30 or 40 meters deep in the sea are now used in the mountains to protect strawberries and tomatoes at 2,000 meters above sea level. Now that is reuse.
Eksian says net pollution is a major threat to fish and other marine creatures, and he's calling for more action to be taken before this out of sight, out of mind problem haunts the seas further. Daniel Padwick, TRT World.
Well, that rounds up your week of news here on Playback. Stay tuned to TRT World for the latest stories.